I want to introduce this concept called AbhimaniDevtas. Okay, so this is an important concept for us to understand. So if you want to approach the Upanishads, if you want to read the Upanishads and the Vedas without having this concept of AbhimaniDevatas, you cannot understand the Upanishad. One cannot understand the head or tail of the Upanishads unless we have this AbhimaniDevata concept. The key there is, in Vedic philosophy, every aspect of the universe has got a conscious being behind it that controls it. Okay, that is the basic philosophy of Vedas. There is always a conscious thing behind an unconscious thing. That unconscious thing, the conscious thing that somehow controls the unconscious jada, could be at various levels. In our own bodies, it could be the jiva, which is a conscious being. It could possibly be the devatas, who may also be influencing this body. It could be Lakshmi who is influencing this body, or it could be Vishnu, Narayana, Krishna himself who will be controlling this body. So all these AbhimaniDevatas, they all are going in various levels of hierarchy. They become important. Why that is the case? So if you look at the Vedas, I've just picked up this couple of verses from Shatapatha Brahmanam. It says Mruda Bravid, which means the mud spoke. Then the next word, Apaha Abruvan, the water spoke. Chandogya Upanishad, we just saw a few minutes ago. Ta Apa Aikshante, water saw. Tat Tejo Aikshata, fire saw. So all these things makes no sense. If this is to be taken literally, can the mud speak? Can the water speak? Can the water see? Can the fire see? They just don't make sense if you take the material water or the material mud or the material fire. Yeah? So there is a much more of a philosophical, esoteric meaning to these words. Look at Antaryami Brahmanam. We spoke about Antaryami Brahmanam, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, when we spoke about how this Antaryami, who is in everything and controls it. If you look at these verses there, Ya Prithvyam Tishtan Prithivya Antaro. I've underlined those. So then it says Apsu. So Prithvi means earth, Apsu means water. Then it says Agnau. Antariksham means sky. Vayo, it means air. So it says all these guys don't know. It says, if you look at the first word, Yaha Prithivyam Tishtan Prithivya Antaro Yam Prithvi Naveda Yasya Prithvi Shariram Yaha Prithivim Antaro Yamayati Yeshate Atma Antaryami Amrutaha. Yeah. That is that mantra that goes on. There are 21 mantras in that particular Antaryami Brahmanam that explains how this cosmic Antaryamin is in every aspect. So when I say Prithivyam, it says, the verse says that the earth does not know that this guy is inside him. How will the earth know it is a jada? The verse, when you look at it superficially, it will not make sense. Similarly, in Chandogya Upanishad, the famous, the Tattvamasi 9 examples that come. Here also there is a second example that talks about it. Imaha Somya Nadyaha Purastat Prachyaha Syandante Paschat Pratishchyaha Samudrat Samudrameva Apiyanti Sa Samudra Eva Bhavati Ta Ita Tatrana Viduhu Yam Mahamasmi Iti. It goes on, it says what it means is, it says, just as how the rivers merge in the ocean, but the rivers do not know that they are different. Each river is different from another river, and it goes on like that. How will the rivers know? Rivers are non-living entities. How can the river know that it is there, that it is different from another river? So when you read the Upanishads in that superficial sense, it will not make logical sense for beings like us who are quite educated and who want to look everything rationally. To settle this problem, Vedavyasa wrote a sutra called Abhimani Vyapadeshastu Visesha Anugatibhyam, which means that wherever in the Vedas these words are coming, they should not be taken for the jada. They should be taken for the AbhimaniDevata, or the conscious being behind this. So when I say Mruda Bravid, which means the mud spoke, means the conscious being behind the mud that controls the mud spoke. Apaha Bruvan, which means the conscious being behind water. Example, Varuna spoke. So that is Ta, Apa. Then if I say Tat Tejo Aikshata, Tejo, fire, Agni Devata, Agni Narayana, they saw. So that is how you have to interpret this. So I think this is important, because in the subsequent slides, I will bring about these concepts as to how the Vedas take this AbhimaniDevtas to describe some core fundamental philosophies. So Abhijit, next slide. So now the question comes is, how many Devatas are out there? Yeah, how many Devatas are out there? You're saying so many Devatas. Okay, the current prevailing view is, some schools will say that there are 33 crore Devatas that are described in Vedic philosophy. That is a huge number. Okay, and some view is it's not 33, it is 9 crores Devatas that are described in the Vedic philosophy. You and I, we don't have to have a controversy or a discussion around this. Both numbers are huge. So there was a discussion in Janaka's court, which is described in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. And again, we took one of the examples, I think 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, describing, I think it was a discussion between Gargi and Yajnavalkya, I think we took. This time, it is a discussion between a guy called Shakalya. And the Shakalya is asking the same question to Yajnavalkya. Just to remind you, for some of you who have joined new, this is a great chapter in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, where there was a king called Janaha Vaidehi. He calls all the philosophers of the region to come in to have a philosophical discourse, so that he can give 1,000 cows to whoever is the most knowledgeable philosopher of the time. And each horn of the cow is with a gold coin. So they get 2,000 gold coins plus 100 cows, whoever is the cleverest. Okay, so all the philosophers assemble, and Yajnavalkya, who was the greatest philosopher of his time, he was also there. So he said, I am the greatest philosopher, I'm going to take all the cows and the coins, and he was about to leave. So at that point, the other philosophers stand up and ask him questions. They ask him some deep philosophical questions, and he answers those questions. Okay, so one such Brahmanam, one such chapter that is described is called Shakalya Brahmanam. Shakalya is asking the same question. He asks the same question to Yajnavalkya. How many devas are out there? Atahi enam vidagdaha Shakalyaha papacha kati deva Yajnavalkyo iti. So how many devas? Okay, so I don't want to go deep into this. It is a very, very, very interesting chapter. So please try and refer this and have a look in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, 3rd Adhyaya. Yeah, so he says, so the way it comes is, they start off with 3003, then they come to 303, then they come to 33. Then in the 33 Devatas, Shakalya asked, who are the 6 chief Devata? Then he lists, then who is the 3 among the 6 who is most important? Then he asks, who is the 2 who is the most important? Then who is the 1.5 who is most important? And finally, who is the most important Devata? So he keeps going and asking that question. Now 33 is important, and I'll tell you why 33 is important. So there is, in the second verse, he says, Ashto, I've underlined that for our benefit, Ashto Vasavaha Ekadasha Rudraha Dwadasha Adityaste Ekatrimshat Indriyascha Prajapatischa Triyam Strin Shau Viti. So he says 8 Vasus, 12 Adityas, 11 Rudras, Indra and Prajapati are the chief Devatas who look after the universe. And then Shakalya goes on and asks, who are these 8 Devatas? Then he goes each one, 8 Vasus, name the 8 Vasus and so on. So read up about this, but the Vasus become very important. Now in this Upanishad, the 8 Vasus that are described in this Upanishad is slightly different from the 8 Vasus that will be described in other Upanishads. Yeah. So now the reason why that is like that is, you have to then put all the information together and understand the context. We've always come to this contextual relevance of what is going on. So these Vasus, the Yajnavalkya goes on and describes why they are called Vasus. Yeteshu hidam Vasu sarvam hitam iti tasmad vasavaha iti. He says, it is these entities, these 8 entities, that are fundamental requirements for maintaining and establishing the universe. And that is why these 8 Vasus are important, is what Yajnavalkya says. And who are these 8 Vasus? Now, just focus on the one in red. I've listed them. What are dear Yajnavalkya is saying? He says, Agni, Prithvi, Vayu, Antariksham, Aditya, Dyav, Chandrama, Nakshatra, iti, Ashta, Vasu. So you have to go into etymology. The Vedic language is the archaic Vedic language is slightly complicated, but essentially what it means is Garuda. Prithvi is another name for Suparni, who is Garuda's consort. Then you have Brahma and Mukhya Prana. Then you have Saraswati and Bharati. Then you have Shiva. Then you have Uma. Then you have Kama and Indra. These are the 8 chief Devatas that Yajnavalkya says are fundamental to the running of the universe. Now, the reason why I felt I have to put this Upanishad verse is, most of us would be familiar with these 8 names. These various Devatas will be familiar with regards to what we do in our daily worship and what we see and pray when we go to temple, for example. So moving on to the next slide. So now we have a grand vision of the universe. So these guys are called the Tattva AbhimaniDevtas. Okay. So now the Devatas of Vedic philosophy is quite a field into itself. And you can spend days, weeks, months, whole lifetime studying about this. So now there are various categories of Devatas in Vedic philosophy. You have the Tattva AbhimaniDevatas, you have Atattva AbhimaniDevatas, you have Karmacha Devatas, Ajana Devatas, and so on and so forth. So here what I have listed is the 24 Tattva AbhimaniDevatas. Okay, so the Vedic philosophy describes, look, behind every component of the material universe, there is a sentient being who has his jurisdiction to make sure that this aspect of the universe works properly. Why that is the case, we'll come to that a little bit later. I've got a couple of interesting slides to get you around that concept. So the names here will all be familiar with you. I'll go through this. See, the Abhimani Devata of Mula Prakriti is Lakshmi. She's got 3 forms, Shri, Bhu and Durga. Mahat, Chaturmukha Brahma. Ahankara is Rudra or Shiva. And this guy is key. Shiva is key in creation because he does all sorts of things. He does all sorts of 5 different aspects of the universe, the Tanmatras, the Bhutas, the Karma Indriyas, Jnana Indriyas, the 5 components of Manas, all these 5 comes from Rudra. So Rudra, we all are familiar with Rudra. Now, if you go to the Panchabhutas, look at Ganesha. He is sitting there. He is the Abhimani Devata of Akasha. And I want to describe an example at the tail end of this presentation of where Ganesha is placed in the Vedic pantheon. He looks after the material sky. Akasha is his portfolio, as it were. Okay. Shiva looks after primarily the mind, along with Garuda and Sesha. The mind has got various devatas who control it. You have Garuda, Sesha, Rudra, Indra, Kama, Brihaspati, Chandra, Parvati, Brahma, Lakshmi. They all have an influence on the mind. But the chief ones are Rudra, Garuda and Sesha. Okay. If you look at Karma Indriyas, if you look at your walk, the speech, yeah, you have Saraswati, Bharati, Parvati. These are all devatas who have the jurisdictions of controlling the walk. If you look at your Jnana Indriyas, your hearing is Chandra, okay, and your eyes is Surya. So they all have these portfolios. Grahana is interesting, Ashwini. Grahana is smell. You smell through your nose. And what are the nose? Nose has got two nostrils. And for 2 nostrils, you have the Ashwini twins. They look after it. Yeah. So if you look at Buddhi, your intelligence, Saraswati, Bharati, Parvati, they all play a role in these aspects. That is the components. Remember, I want to remind you, this is still the Brahmanda, pre-Brahmanda that we are talking, where all these evolutes have happened. So the system in Vedic philosophy is consciousness is behind it, have a portfolio and jurisdiction to make sure that that component of the material universe is working properly. Yeah. So that is the portfolios of Devatas in Brahmanda. What about in Pindanda, which is our body? And we spent a lot of time talking about this in our sessions before. And I've listed them here, exactly where they are placed. So, Surya is your Abhimani Devata of your eye. Okay. And for your speech, Agni, Saraswati, Bharati, Parvati, they have the portfolio. Okay. For reproduction, for your urination and defecation, Mitra and Yama. Okay, hands is very important. Hand is the most important karma indriya. Indra is the AbhimaniDevata for that. For hearing, it is Chandra. Okay, so look at this figure. What are the portfolios of all these Devathas as per Vedic philosophy in our own body? So that what immediately recognizes the portfolio in the Brahmanda and the portfolio in the Pindanda are exactly the same. So they are doing the same function.
HinduKnowledgeAcademy.com will celebrate Vedic culture and present its philosophies to the modern Hindu in an accessible format. Our ancient heritage is our greatest strength. Through preservation and dissemination, together let us spread positivity in the world. Thank you for listening and welcome to Hindu Knowledge Academy.